I recently made a video where I explained how you don't need code to make amazing things in Streamer.bot. But one of the things I didn't do was go into detail on how to make that happen. So today I really want to go into detail on how to make these non-coded amazing things in Streamer.bot. So hello, I'm Gene. Welcome to the channel. I hope you guys are enjoying my content. And if you're new to this, you might want to hit subscribe and check out some of my other content because I got a lot of good stuff. But today I'm focusing on something I made for a fellow streamer named VinnyBlanc. Now, VinnyBlanc runs a pinball stream, so all his content is focused on pinball machines. For me, I was personally just like over the moon with it. Anyway, VinnyBlanc asked me to help make something for him with Streamer.bot for his stream. The idea is simple, that if an icon is to appear on the screen, the chat can then hit a command and claim the redeem and either hit a jackpot or a super rare jackpot that they can claim, and it gets recorded and then they can pull that information anytime they want to. And I'm going to show you guys how to do this without code whatsoever, and I'm going to use VinnyBlanc's redeem that I have put together as an example of how to do this. Now, one of the things when you're creating something like this is needing to understand, well, what all do you need? So first, let me just say we need to start with an idea. What is your general idea? Mark that down, and then we need to go, what comes first? So we can go two routes on how we want to start. You can either go with what's going to trigger it. And if we're thinking about what's going to trigger it, are we triggering it by a channel point redeem? Are we triggering it by a command or whatnot? Is this going to need multiple different triggers? Because if it's going to need multiple different triggers, you're probably going to need multiple different actions to make this work. And that's one way to think about this. Okay, cool. I'm going to need a bunch of different actions in order to make this work. The other way we can approach this is going, okay, well, if we have one thing happen, does it need to do one thing or another? Are we going to have to be able to split this into two different avenues of thinking or multiple different avenues of thinking? So if this happens, is it going to do this or is it going to do that? If it is going to do this, we're likely going to need multiple actions because of the way the logic works in Streamer.bot. But if you don't need it, well, then only one action may be needed, but you never know. The process of going through this, you may wind up having to do multiple actions to make this function properly. The next inevitable thing we need to think about is, do we need to save anything? So one of the first things I kind of look at is, do I need to make this an adaptable build? And what I mean by an adaptable build is, are we going to need this to be where we have a group of sub-actions that we need to be able to copy and move to another action, and we need to basically consistently pull similar information over and over again? Or do I want to set this up to where I have a single action that will set everything that I need to, and then we'll run everything else and I won't have to worry out? And so an adaptable build, this is something that you can set it up to be where it is a basic framework for other things that you may build in the future. This is where the meat and potatoes of really making complicated redeems comes in, and that is retrieving variables at any time. And this comes down to two different things. You're either going to use a non-persisted global variable or a persisted global variable. So let me go ahead and explain to you the difference between the two and how you can save variables differently, because this is the key thing of making complicated redeems. So what you're going to need to do to make these things work is to go to the global variables and be able to set them, retrieve them, and know what you're doing with them. So let me break this down in a way that hopefully gives you the information you need to help drive your ideas forward. So the first thing we need to do in our sub-actions would be to go to core, come down to the globals. And here you're going to have global get and global set. These two are going to be absolutely essential for you as you develop your redeem. So let's start with a global set. When you do a global set variable, you have a few different destinations you can work with. There is the global. Now, a global variable is basically saying that this is a general variable we can pull from. This is being able to be used for anything. We can pull this variable at any time and use it for anything else that we're using within Streamer.bot. Additionally, we have where there's user redeem. Now, the user redeem is basically saying we're going to save this variable for this one specific person. That way, anytime a trigger is run and we have something being saved as a variable for one person, each person will get their own value stored. This is how you can make sure you track a score or a counter for how many times somebody has done something. This is the method to do that. Additionally, we have user target, and this comes from basically an input method. You do, exclamation point SO that normally a lot of people do, but then they put the name after it. Well, if you wanted to store that name, you could do it using user target. It's going to take the first thing that appears there and save that as the username. And then you would be able to retrieve that username at a later time if you needed to with your sub actions or anything else you're working. Now, with these, you also have the option for persisted or non-persisted. Now, with a persisted global variable, this is saying this is going to save into Streamer.bot and it's going to remain there unless you delete it completely out of the variable. So whether you close Streamer.bot or not, it's always going to be there. So close Streamer.bot, bring it back up, bam, that variable is still populated with the last thing that was inputted. Now, if you do a non-persisted variable, that's going to say, well, as soon as you close Streamer.bot out, that is gone. You don't have to worry about it anymore, and it's going to not load up the next time. The next thing we're going to be looking at is the variable name. Now, the variable name is basically saying, this is what I want it to be stored as. This is the name of whatever information it is going to be stored as, and I will retrieve it by this particular name. It's like naming your child. I want this child to be named Emma, and everything that Emma is going to be this value that I am storing. Every piece of information is going to be right there, and that's Emma. And anytime I say, hey, Emma, boom, there's all the information. There's different ways you can populate what makes up that variable. So the first thing that we have here is an argument. Now, this is something that if you have an argument from a previous thing or the trigger or another sub action, this is what you could put in here. So let's just go ahead and say that we're doing a score. So we save the variable name as a score. We're going to save this by each person, and it's going to save persistent. We're going to keep this for all time. Well, the argument that we're going to populate this with, let's just say it comes from someone's watch streak, and then variable we're using is the watch streak that comes through. That's coming from the trigger and being populated that way. Then we would input it just simply as watch streak. So if you've never worked with this stuff before and you don't know where these variables come from, you need to be looking at one thing in particular. And the thing you need to be looking at is the Streamer.bot documentation. Everything you need to know about the variables you can use based on whatever you're using as sub actions, triggers, whatnot, is going to be in this documentation. So let me give you a brief overview of how this works. What you're going to be looking at mainly here would be the API. And that's going to include all the sub actions, all the triggers, and C# methods if you want to sit and you want to program C#. If I go to triggers, in these triggers, you will see that we have where we can do core, custom, and all sorts of different things. Well, this I'm going to be pulling from Twitch's watch streak. So I'm going to go down to Twitch. These are all the different triggers that are used within Streamer.bot. What you're going to notice is that it has the values that you set within the trigger itself. More importantly, are these variables. So here, this is what's going to populate is we get watch streak. So we have, this is the variable name right here. These are the variable names you get. This is what it's going to return with. So this can list the channel points rewarded for their watch streak. It can do the message that goes with it. But what I'm looking for is, what is their watch streak? How many is it? And here it would return the value of 5. So what's happening here is I'm saying, cool. So if your score is going to turn into whatever your watch streak is, there's your score. So you would have a score of 5. And that's what I'm saving it as. But beyond that, we also have where you can do a value. Now, a value isn't going to populate with any kind of argument. This is literally an input that you're putting in. So if you wanted somebody's score to be 10 because of something they did, and that is the score they have, and we're overriding any other score they have, bam, that's what you would use. But if you're actually wanting to track and bring their scores up or down, we need to do something completely different. That's where increment and decrement are going to come in handy. So if you want, based on whatever's happening, we want the Twitch user's score to increase by 10, we would do an increment. And what it's going to do is take whatever value is there first and then add 10 to it. This way, we're taking a value and making it larger. And then if you need to take away points from somebody, like, we're taking 5 points from Gryffindor again, then you would use deepen, and this would bring the score value down based on whatever was there first, and then subtracting the value put in. You can use this in various different ways, whether you're using the global, you're using a user redeem, however you want to make this work. But the key thing is, remember what you stored your variables as. And if you ever forget what you stored your variables as, just go to this variables tab at the top of Streamer.bot, click it. This will give you the list of all your persisted globals, non-persisted globals that are currently running in this instant. And then here you can do Twitch, YouTube. Right now it's only has Twitch names. And then you can search for specific users. This way you can check what each persisted value you have sitting there, or if you do them as non-persistent for each user. And that is how you can check if you get what variable you're trying to pull from something else. An easy way to find out. Okay, so understanding the global variables is going to be absolutely essential when you're creating something like this. So what I'm now going to show you is what I made for VinnyBlanc. At the core, the idea is once an icon appears in the corner of the screen, it's going to flash, and that's the indicator that there is a current live jackpot. And then everybody in chat then has to enter a command to try and redeem it first. Whoever redeems it first gets a jackpot. Not only are we going to say, well, you get a jackpot, but you have a chance to receive the super jackpot, which is going to do something different from the regular jackpot. And then the last thing I need to do is be able to let users put into chat a command to let them see how many jackpots and super jackpots they've got. This way, they can check their stats and compare them against everybody else in chat. So this is exactly what needs to happen. So let me walk you through how I have set this up for VinnyBlanc. Now, the one thing I want to point out is that I have grouped all these different actions that are going to make up this one thing into its own group. This makes it easy to organize, to look at, and be able to identify issues with, rather than trying to search from one spot to another spot to another spot to another spot. This keeps everything contained, and then we can collapse it if nothing's going wrong, and we can just leave it alone. Now, since I am creating this for somebody else, I wanted to make sure I had settings and instructions set up for him so that way he didn't have to try and figure this out on his own. All these different colors represent just comments that I put in here. These are just saying, hey, here's the instructions to let you know what you need to be doing. All these black ones right here refer to what scene and what items we're going to be using in order to make things happen in OBS. Because I don't know his setup in OBS, this is the way that makes it easier for him to change it based on whatever scene he has these in. This is also a great way to make sure that if you want to make this a modular setup, something that you can change and go, well, we're going to have it for this scene, for this stream, but then we're going to do it different for this other stream. This is a great way to make sure that you have settings you can set it to and not have to go through and individually set everything yourself. So what I did here was, as you can see, I set globals. So if I double click this, you'll see that I set a global persisted of jackpot scene. And what I'm setting this as is a value of whatever this scene name is. In here is where VinnyBlanc would have to write in the scene name that these items belong to. The scene's called something. Well, we need to put that exact scene name as it's written in OBS in here. And what will happen then is this gets saved and stored in Streamer.bot and stays there no matter if we're going to close it or not. So this will always remain the same so long as we don't change it. Now, to make sure that this will be set every single time in case he changes it and didn't remember, oh yeah, I needed to set these variables, I made sure that I put up here that if the stream is started, it will set all these values down here. So that way the values are set once the stream starts and he's good to go. Now, because I can't put everything in here because some things cannot be set with variables, I had to put the instructions that we have a timer that's going to be used, and you've got to use the timer settings, and I put where to find those, as well as how to adjust where we need to do the adjustment for the probability of getting a super jackpot, as well as if he wants to change how I set up the messages on all those different Twitch messages that can be put out there. So the next thing that I set up is, well, okay, what needs to happen first to get this started? And the first thing that we need to do is make sure that the icon to let people know, hey, a game is started, We need to make sure that happens. This next action I call start event, just so that way I know this is what kicks everything off. Up here, you'll notice in the triggers that it is triggered by a timed action that I had referred to before, and it is called VinnyBlanc's jackpot. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to settings, we're gonna go to timed actions, and here we have VinnyBlanc's jackpot. Now currently it is not enabled. See, it is currently disabled. Now, when we're looking at this with a timed action, one, yes, we have the name, but the reason I have this disabled right now is because I want to make sure that this only kicks off when we want it to kick off. As we run this action, I want to make sure that we don't have overlapping times happening. So this needs to only be enabled when it needs to be enabled. So if he has it pop up on the screen and nobody claims it within, let's say the 300 seconds I have there, and the timer goes off again, it's going to run that action again. And we don't need that to happen when nothing's happened so far. We're still waiting on a redeem to happen. So we don't need the timer to be active. I have this set up as random, and this is basically saying between 300 and 600 seconds, at any point in there, we can have this trigger. And it could be at 350 seconds, it could be at 499, it could be 512. It could be any number between those two values that are set, giving a little bit more of an unpredictable pop-up, rather than being, well, we know every single 30 minutes it's gonna pop up, and we know, okay, I'll have that ready because that 30 minutes is up. This way it gives that randomness to it, and people don't know when it's gonna happen. Additionally, if you want to have an extra thing to throw in there saying that, well, we have to have 20 comments, we have to have 20 lines of chat before it triggers, then we would enter in here 20 lines of chat. But I don't know if that's what he wants to use, so I'm going to keep that at 0. Do I want this to repeat? No, we don't need this to repeat, and we don't need this enabled because we're going to do that manually through the actions. So now we're going to go back to our actions, and we're going to look at start event, and we're going to look at the sub actions now. Now, what you're going to see, I have this folder here that's called get settings variable. Now, using a folder like this is a way for me to combine certain things that I'm going to need to call upon multiple times. This way, all I have to do is copy that group and then paste it into another action rather than having to manually add every single item. So if I expand this out, you'll see that we have the jackpot scene, the icon, the sound for jackpot, and the sound for super jackpot. So what we have is we've getting this global variable, and we're pulling the stored name from the global variable, and we're setting it in this action, calling it scene. This way, whatever I'm saying, hey, this is the scene we're gonna have. I'm leaving the default value blank. That way, in case something doesn't quite work right, maybe he misspelled something, that it's not going to run the action. This way, it is just going to stay disabled until it gets fixed. That way, we don't have anything saving incorrectly or running incorrectly. So after it gets all those, we're going to set a small delay just to give Streamer.bot enough time to be able to go, okay, let me set all these variables to know what we need to do. Now, we're going to turn off the timer. And the reason we're turning off the timer is because now this is active. We have the icon up and we have everything running that we want to have running. So we don't need that timer to continue to keep re-triggering this one thing over and over again when nobody's redeemed it. Now next, you can set this either way, but I put the OBS source visibility state is the scene and the icon. I do want to show you that if you open this up, it automatically changes. So I've opened it up and it automatically put it as test scene and test icon, and I can't exactly put the variables in like that. What I have to do is I have to type it out. And what I'm doing is making sure that what we saved it at when we're getting the variables and setting it for the action matches. So here, the scene name will populate this spot, as well as the icon, the name that we have of that, populating in here. And we want to make sure that this turns on, and it's going to play that video file for people to let them know that this is started. Once you hit OK, it will save the way it needs to. Then I have this part that's to set a global called jackpot active to true. So why did I set this up? Well, this is basically saying that the game is now active. So if the game is active, we need to make sure that we can enable the command. The command is going to work. If we have it set that, yes, this is active, then people can trigger the command, it will redeem as it's supposed to. And if it's set to false, if somebody triggers the command we're going to use, it's not going to do anything. And that's what we're trying to make sure, is that people can't just claim a jackpot when there's no jackpot to be claimed at that point. So we have to make sure there's a yes, it's active, or no, it's not. Now, you'll notice that there is nothing else outside of that. That is all done. So what do we do now? Well, we don't want to add anything after this because the action's just going to run straight through the list of everything. And that's not what we want to have happen. We want to make sure that this all ends when somebody actually does the redeem form, in which case we need to make sure that we're setting up another action to make that happen. So the next thing that I have up here is the user claim. And this is the trigger. Anytime somebody would put this into the chat, claim their prize, this is what's going to happen to shut down the game, determine the winner, and go from there. So in here, I have where we have a command trigger that they have to do ! claim. And with this, I've just made sure that, hey, I have got a name for it so I know what it is. And then ! claim is how they will redeem this. It will ignore the bot, it'll ignore any internal messages used in Streamer.bot, and it's going to respond to Twitch messages. If I wanted to limit it to just the VIPs and subscribers, I'd just add them to the allowed. Or if I just want certain people to redeem it, I can put it here. So once this gets triggered, what's going to happen is we're going to get that global. So what's happening here is we're getting that global variable that we had set, and we're checking. Get this, we're going to set this in here as active. And I gave it a default value of false. In case for some reason this doesn't work the way it's supposed to, it's not going to give people jackpots it's not supposed to. So I'm using the default value as a failsafe for this. Now the next thing we add is a logic. Now, a logic, you just go to core, come down to logic, and you go to the if else. And in here you'll see we have where the variable we called active being pulled, that's the value of what we pulled from the get global. If it equals true, we're not going to do anything and we're going to continue. Basically saying if global variable says it's true, cool, we're good to go, push forward. Else condition is if it is not going to be true. If this is false, then I'm going to break. And break means we're going to stop right there, we're not going to continue, and everything is done. So let's assume that this is true. We do have it active. Cool. What's going to happen is it's going to move forward. Next up is we add our info from the Twitch target, which is adding the information from the person who is redeeming this. This is pulling so much information that if you look at the Streamer.bot documentation, has a plethora of information that you can pull from, including name, are they subscribed, are they a moderator, are they a VIP, how long has their channel been here, there are so many different variables that get populated with this one action that you can do a ridiculous amount of things with. But for our purposes, we're really just doing this for the name. Now, next up, we have where it's a random number between 1 and 100. Now here, all you got to do is do a between. So between numbers 1 and 100. So this is basically saying I'm giving you a 1% chance for something to happen. Now here, it says if the random number equals 2, another if-else statement, we are going to do this super jackpot redeem. If the random number that is generated equals 2, you get the super jackpot. But if it does not equal 2, then we're just going to do a regular jackpot. And what this is referring to is two different actions that we have built. They work identically, but it's basically determining whether we're going to do a super jackpot and count it that way, or we're going to do the regular jackpot and count it that way. This way, giving that extra incentive to get those redeems to see if you can get that super rare super jackpot. And then last, we need to make sure that the icon that signals that you can redeem this jackpot, we need to make sure that goes away because somebody's claimed it now. So again, the scene and the icon get filled here, and we've set the visibility state to hidden. So with this action where it's saying, okay, well, we got to do a jackpot or a super jackpot, we now have these two actions here. Now, again, I said that these work practically identically. There's just minor changes. So let me just do the regular jackpot. So in here, I added another add target for info for redeem. I do this as a backup just because sometimes things get lost in translation when you're going from one action to another. Now, when I say that, that's really been a me problem. It doesn't happen all the time. But I do this because I'm neurotic, I'm anal retentive, and I want to make sure things work. So we get that. Then it's going to do and increment the user-specific jackpot win. So what I'm doing here is we're storing whoever redeemed it. They're going to get a +1 to their jackpot win, the variable I'm storing to their specific name. Then I add a small delay just to make sure it records. Then we get user-specific jackpot win, which is what we just set. Now, you might be asking yourself, why are you getting this when you just set it? Well, because we set it, but we got to bring it back so it returns the proper value. So that way we know exactly how much it is. That way when we put a Twitch message out there, or any other way we're making this happen, it's going to populate correct. So here I have the redeemer. I'm calling the correct thing exactly as it's written beforehand and exactly how it's stored. I'm setting it to jwins. So in this action, this is what I'm going to call upon for the value that we're populating with. Now, this is important when you're doing something where you're incrementing or decrementing, or you're doing any kind of value work that uses numbers. Set the default value to 0. And the reason you want to do this is because if they don't have a value or something isn't quite going the way it's supposed to, we make sure there's a value assigned to it. We make sure that we have a number in place for anything else that follows. So now we have that variable here. We're going to get all those variables in the settings again, make sure they set. Now the OBS source visibility state, we're doing the scene and say jackpot. That is the jackpot sound, the sound that's going to trigger when somebody claims a jackpot. So it's going to make sure that this turns on like it's supposed to. Then we send a Twitch message. And here, the target user, it gets populated from Twitch, add target info from user who redeemed. This is one of the variables you can get, in which you can find in the Streamer.bot documentation, and you can see all the variables it will populate with. So the person has won a jackpot. They have had a total of how many jackpots. This is going to tell them how many they are now up to, because we did increase it by 1 and then we returned it back of what the new value is, and we put it in here. Then I'm going to delay for 10 seconds. Now, the reason I'm delaying for 10 seconds right now is because I know there's going to be a sound playing. I want to make sure that when the sound is done playing, it turns off. This way, it's going to be reset and ready to go for the next time we have this happen and it gets redeemed. So again, it's going to be the scene and the say jackpot, but this time we're going to make it hidden instead of visible. Now, the next thing that's going to happen is we're going to set the global of the jackpot active to false. This way we're saying, now the game's over. If somebody hits the command to try and claim later, it's not going to run anything, because guess what? It's already been claimed. There's no point in running this again. And then finally, we turn the timer back on. So what this will do is then start the timer at 1 second and count up until you hit that random number, that whatever is going to be determined between 300 and 600 that I've currently got set at. It will, once it hits that point, we start the process all over again based off the trigger of the timer. And under the super jackpot, you'll see that everything looks identical, except we've just changed super jackpot wins and we've named it SJ wins when it comes back. And we've changed the message to say they've won a super jackpot and they've had this many super jackpots. Now, that covers the full process of the jackpot redeem and everything. But now we have to have one more thing added to this, and that's the command to let users see how many jackpots and super jackpots they've got. Now, we've stored those values using the user globals, and we have those values stored. Now we just need to retrieve them and put them into a Twitch message. So here I've added one that's called user stats, and there's a separate command for this that's called jackpots. It can be changed to whatever we want, but I'm just leaving it as jackpots for now. What it's going to do is going to say, hey, who redeemed this? Let's get their information, mainly their name. And then we're gonna see, well, let's pull up their jackpot wins. How many have they had? And we're gonna set it to jackpots. And we're gonna get how many super jackpots they've got. And we're gonna set it to super jackpot. If they haven't had any, this is what's important with a redeem like this, is you need to make sure these 0 values are there. If those 0 values are not there, it can come up as a not number. And it'll say NAN. And that can potentially cause more issues down the line that you don't want, in which I discovered when I put together my achievement system in my streams, which multiple times somebody had gifted a sub, and I kept getting NAN because, well, I was an idiot and didn't see that one was persisted, one was not persisted. So I was setting it as I was setting it as a non-persisted variable and then trying to retrieve it as a persisted variable. And guess what? They didn't line up, and it kept giving me a NAN, and that caused multiple issues, and I didn't see that for months, because sometimes you overlook stuff the more complicated it gets. But once we have these populated, we get the Twitch message to trigger, in which case we have the target username. Again, from this one action, we get our total number of jackpots from jackpots, and we get our super jackpots from our super jackpot. This way, it will return the value of this person's total numbers of different jackpots and super jackpots. And that is the entire redeem process. That is how this is put together, and it literally revolves around using global variables as a method to save the information, pull it at different points, and use it as a method to not only trigger things in OBS, but to do Twitch messages, keep track of individual scores and counts, and various other ways. Making these kinds of redeems comes with a lot of trial and error, a lot of playing around with stuff, and really, no joke, making a lot of mistakes. And that is probably one of the other key aspects of this, is not only understanding how global variables will play into making complicated redeems, but also you need to understand you're going to make mistakes. You are going to wind up screwing something up over and over again. This is how you see all these crazy things happen in streams, is because these are built with the understanding that you have different things you're working with. And you can build something that looks incredibly complicated, but really doesn't even revolve around using many variables at all. In fact, if you take the raid alert I made, in my raid alert that I created, you can see that really this was not built with code. This is literally me just telling every single aspect of Streamer.bot what to do at what time. It's a gigantic list. Easy to get lost in. But you have to be patient, you have to be willing to make mistakes, and you have to be willing to understand that anything is really possible as long as you're willing to dedicate yourself to making it and understanding how it needs to work. So if you ever want to test out this jackpot redeem, make sure you're going to VinnyBlanc's Twitch channel and watching his stream and see if you can claim that jackpot yourself. He'll probably change a few things up. Just be ready for that, because my video is not going to be the definitive way this is. It's not my redeem. So with that, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm going to catch you on the next one, which I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be awesome. See you guys there!